Welcome back to the Fantasy Hockey Podcast Weekend Preview Edition. Lots going on this weekend. There's actually teams that are playing both off nights, which means there's going to be some good suggestions or some terrible ones, depending on how they go, I suppose. One thing to note really quick before we get started is that our giveaway ends Sunday, so be sure to enter on that. If you go to our Twitter, at FantasyHockeyPD, it's the pinned tweet. You can win a scarf and a beanie by submitting a Google form. There's 4 ways to enter, so you have possible 4 entries into our giveaway, so be sure to go do that before Sunday evening, or if you're watching this on YouTube, it'll be down in the comments, so go do that. Okay, so let's start first with the first segment of Weekend Preview, and that's 10 takes. So I'll start with mine first here, and that is the Blackhawks seem to be shaking things up. I remember last year their coach, who I'm not going to try to say the name of because I know I'll get it wrong and flamed for it, so I'm just going to call him the Blackhawks coach. Last year said that he was planning on keeping Taves and Kane together like almost forever, right? He made it seem like he had no interest in separating the pair, and now they're separated.
Yep.
And not sure how I feel about that. I'd say it's a net negative. Oh, and on top of that, Gustafsson is down to the third pairing. His minutes have dropped a ton. He's been dropped in a lot of leagues, and I would say that his top power play is in question.
You'd have to see if Boquist is going to come floating up at some point, but I think for now his top power play is probably okay, just because like the other options are like Keith and Seabrook, I guess. Which what are we? It was this 2013. I think they'd rather stick with Gustafsson given those options. It's just a matter of if there's a call up, it can get really interesting really quickly for him.
You'd think.
Obviously, this affects Jonathan Toews the worst because now he's sitting with Kajula and who did they even put on top left wing?
Oh, it's Alex DeBrincat. Yeah, so DeBrincat is top line with Toews and Kajula. Not good for DeBrincat either, to be honest. I liked when DeBrincat was on Kane's line.
Well, I mean, I even liked DeBrincat and Strome. I thought that was something that wasn't needed to be shaken up. If anything, I mean, you could have surrounded, I guess, I'm sure they were worried about surrounding Toews with Shaw or Perlini or something, and Kajula, that's probably not going to be beneficial for him. So maybe they wanted to split. But if you're going to do that, you might as well just keep Toews and Kane together and then keep your pair of Strome and DeBrincat, which have worked really well. But it is what it is. All right. So my first piece is not necessarily about like NHL players in general. It's about something that I think gets lost a bit in the noise of trying to min-max your roster is you can prepare for next week now if you think you're far enough ahead or you have a bunch more starts on your opponent, you're already winning most of the week, you can start preparing for next week. And I've been thinking about this in some of my leagues. I'm thinking, okay, I don't really need to use my last couple ads to pick up guys on a Friday or Sunday or whatever to lock up my matchups. So I could be getting a jump start on next week and looking at teams like, for example, Detroit. You can get a Detroit player for Friday, and then you'll also have them Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday. So you get 3 off nights. Tuesday's not an off night, but it's still a lighter day. And that way you can kind of maximize this week while also focusing on next week. If you go for a Friday, Sunday player, if they play Sunday, they're definitely not going to get Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday of the next week, almost certainly. But if you go with a Friday player, that'll be an off night this week, you can feel like there's a better chance at least that, you can just look. That's the main thing is look at next week also if you have the opportunity to. Ottawa has one of the best schedules, weirdly enough. So, there's nothing to suggest there, unfortunately, but it is a thing that exists. But yeah, that's just one thing that I feel like towards the end of the week, everybody's focusing on making sure they lock up. Or I actually saw a question on Twitter about adding Nate Schmidt into an IR plus slot just because there's an extra ad. And I thought about it and I was like, you could do that, but Nate Schmidt, does he matter even if he comes back? He's probably going to be dropped out of your IR slot back to the free agency in most cases. And what you could be doing is dropping a player that will play Saturday that you're going to bench anyway for a player that may or may not play an off night this weekend, but will play good nights next week and basically get a jump start.
Yep, and to couple that, also when you're making those ads and thinking about that, also take a look at the opponent for next week and see what they're strong in. Because if, for example, the next week you see that someone is strong in hits, then that also can give you some guidance as to what to actually aim for the next week. Then you know, okay, well, I probably won't win in hits, so the guy I add will be better in like points or shots on goal, and know what you're chasing. Don't just go and blindly add for the sake of maximizing. Also maximize within those categories with the ones that you think you have the best chance at winning. Moving on to the next thing here, my third take. The Devils are a mess. It seems like nothing they do is working. Gusev has been tried on literally every line. Heishier's injured.
I swear on both sides at this point. I think he's been on every wing except for first left wing one. It's crazy.
Yeah, I think they're the only winless team left through 6 games, and they've blown 2 or 3 leads now, big leads. It's not pretty. Now, granted, we are recording this before they play the Rangers, and there's a good chance that they could beat the Rangers. So we may be saying this prematurely as the only winless team, but who knows? Maybe they still will be after we release this. But they don't look good. I am so low on the Devils at the moment. I obviously wouldn't drop or anything with Taylor Hall. Even Kyle Palmieri is, I think, kind of a buy low candidate at the moment. I still think they'll figure it out. You've got to think Hines is on the hot seat.
And for sure.
Right now, yeah, it's just right now seems like nothing is working. And I think they just need to be shaken up a little bit, whether it's with a new coach or I honestly don't know. But I think that there's much more offensive prowess to be had there than what's currently happening. And so I wouldn't overreact too much. I think that you should lower your expectations rest of season, but not necessarily completely give up on them.
Yeah, I think Subban is the biggest pain point. Lucky enough, I actually was fairly high on him to start the season, as plenty of other fantasy hockey players were. But him being off top power play is about the most horrifying thing I can hear to be owning Subban for. I mean, you can't drop him. I wouldn't want to sell him low either. I'm just pulling my hair out hoping that this thing changes. Yeah. But the Devils. Oh boy. All right, for our fourth take here, my second take. I feel like the player that I've heard the most about so far is Devan Dubnyk. As far as especially goaltending,
easily.
There's like Dubnyk and then there's Samsonov, right? There's the 2 guys I'm hearing about all the time. Dubnyk on the downside of things, and what I want to mention is Dubnyk's backup is Alex Stalock. Alex Stalock has never been a good goaltender, really. He's not even been a great backup, and so they're going to need Dubnyk to be able to pick it back up the way he was last season. And you look at the workload that Dubnyk's had so far. Who are the teams that he's played? He played Nashville, Colorado, Winnipeg, Pittsburgh, and Toronto. The only one of those teams that isn't a massively high goal-scoring team is Nashville, and they did wind up lighting up Minnesota anyway. But you're looking at a list of teams there that's among the hardest you could look at. So you're coming into the season on a shaky Minnesota team to begin with, and they just get run down by some of the best teams in the league, at least from an offensive point of view. So I'm still, pumping the brakes a little bit on Dubnyk. I'm not completely freaking out about what'll happen to him long term. We're still super early in the season. Minnesota is still pretty good defensively, despite what they've shown so far. At least I want to believe so. That's what they've shown in prior years, and that's why Dubnyk's numbers have been good, despite the fact that Minnesota was not the best goal-scoring team last season. So, bearing that all in mind, don't snip Dubnyk just yet. Give him a little bit longer. Yeah. His upside is tremendous, especially in saves leagues. And he's going to get a ton of starts. I know Stalock is starting, well, this probably aired after the game started, but he starts starting on Thursday, and that has enough people freaking out as it is. But that makes sense. I mean, Dubnyk has had a rough go of it, and you might as well give Stalock an extra start here or there.
Yeah, and another thing to mention with Dubnyk, which I talked about on Building Winners when I picked him up this past weekend, I used my number 1 waiver on him, and people were like, well, that's a little bit crazy. Why are you using your number 1 waiver on Devan Dubnyk? And there's a few reasons. I think one, in a saves league, there's a lot of upside to a guy like Dubnyk who could still start a lot of games. And on top of that, there's a few good indicators. So one is that his high danger save percentage at all strengths, which includes the PK, of course, is sitting at 52%. Which is insanely low. That's just not normal. And the other guy that's similar to that is Braden Holtby. They both are doing fine at low danger and okay at mid danger save ranges. It's their high danger that's really suffering. And those are the ones where usually a goaltender, especially of the caliber of Devan Dubnyk or Braden Holtby, will normally be in kind of the 80 to 85-ish range, somewhere in there. And so for them to be in the 50s is way too low and not sustainable. They'll definitely bring that back. And if you look at, for example, the last game that Dubnyk played, he had like 2 unlucky plays. One of them bounced off the glass and fell right in front of him, and it was like a tap-in. The other one was a breakaway that just had a bad rebound off his pad, and the guy got the rebound and stuffed it in. So 2 of those 4 goals that you let in last time really weren't, or maybe it was 5 last game. I don't remember exactly, but 2 of those goals were not, who knows, some high number. But those 2 goals honestly weren't, he literally could have done nothing about. I mean, he made the first save on the breakaway, or it was like a pass that became a breakaway, whatever. There wasn't much he could do about it. And so when I look at a guy like Dubnyk, in my eyes, one, he's played, it's it's a high blend of him playing poorly and being very unlucky. And the other thing there is that at all strengths, his expected save percentage is 9.215. So it lends you to believe, again, kind of how you were saying, is Minnesota's playing well in front of him. They're playing well defensively. And it's a mix of him getting, the chances that do get through are very high danger opportunities, and he's not really stopping them. And that's a mix of luck and him. Like if you look at, the one that bounced off the glass, for example, is considered a high danger opportunity because the shot came from the slot. But literally, there's nothing he could do about that. So Dubnyk, in my opinion, can bounce back. I think the question is, will he? Because, we saw this last year with Quick. We said there's a lot of, his underlying stats and everything show, well, Quick last year, actually, his underlying stats did not show he was going to bounce back, but still, he was behind a good defense, and it was hard to make the case of he's done, and look at him now. And so I don't think we're there with Dubnyk yet. I don't think it's time to get there, but I would say that I would have a much, much shorter leash on him in a save percentage and goals against average league if this continues for like a week or so. Whereas in a saves league, I'd give him a much longer leash and just see what happens, because even if he's putting up these terrible numbers, he's still going to be getting you lots of saves and lots of starts, most likely.
I would give him at least till November before I really start freaking out. Give him the next couple of weeks, and because if you have to drop Dubnyk, the things I'm hearing are like, should I drop Dubnyk and pick up Halak and Samsonov or something and drop a skater as well? And it's like, that scares me. that kind of like doubling down on lower starts to try to make up for a blown second goalie pick is something I'd rather avoid if possible. But
yeah, and not to mention someone like Samsonov is most likely at max. Like max is going to get 35-ish starts, something like that. So at some point you will be streaming again.
Yep.
And so it doesn't really solve much. And to be honest, like when you look at a guy like Samsonov, I know we're all in love with Samsonov right now, but he hasn't looked that fantastic. Like,
no, he hasn't.
He hasn't been that impressive. He's getting wins, but aside from that, he hasn't blown me away. His
stats look good, right? Like the stats that you're looking at from a fantasy perspective, save percentage, goal against average, they look fine. But when you get deeper into it, especially if you watch him play, Washington's been extremely good in front of him. Extremely good. Yeah. John Carlson has saved at least 1 or 2 goals that were like sure goals. So goalies, fun stuff. Goalies are fun.
Moving on to my next one here, I'm going to talk about Tampa, who in my opinion is playing with absolute fire right now and getting very, very lucky, both from a save percentage standpoint and a shooting percentage standpoint. They're one of the highest teams in the league in terms of shooting percentage, one of the highest percentage teams in save percentage, and that's not exactly great. But then from a Corsi perspective, they're actually second to last right now by quite a margin, and that's not where you want to be. You don't want to be third highest in PDO and second lowest in Corsi. Now, for those that don't know what PDO is, it's simply save percentage added up with your shooting percentage, and you normally don't want that to be very high. The higher that is, more likely you're benefiting from luck. And then to pair that with low Corsi, which is shot attempts for versus your shot attempts against, means that you're not controlling the play as much. That's not good. That means that you're getting outplayed and you're getting very lucky, and that's what's happening right now with Tampa Bay. And so I don't have anything against Tampa Bay. I think they'll be fine, but I do think that there's a little bit of reason for concern there in terms of if they can't turn that Corsi part around, you're going to see Tampa struggle here soon, I think, which is just kind of a note to Vasilevsky owners and a note, I think, also to any kind of like Stamkos or Kucherov or those kinds of owners. I mean, Braden Point is already struggling, but as a whole, the team is benefiting from a pretty high shooting percentage.
All right, my next take is I don't like to do this too much where we talk about kind of going back to things we mentioned in preseason being like, look what we said. But Tyson Barrie, I feel like, was one of the biggest problematic draft picks that we saw coming into the season. There was a lot of projections for him to be like 60 points for literally no reason. And now we're seeing him go pointless in his last 5 games. And it shouldn't be that big of a surprise, honestly. Tyson Barrie is going to get the majority of his point scoring from even strength now, which was not his strong suit last season. He got something like almost 50% of his points from power play. He's not going to get that this season. Not going to get it. Not going to happen at all, especially with how well Morgan Riley's doing there already. So Barrie's not going to break into power play 1, barring something crazy or an injury. And without that, his point scoring is going to be low. I mean, I said at the beginning of the season, I still see him being over a 40-point player which is nowhere near 60, as we all know. But breaking 40 points without being a power play one defenseman is not normal. There's very few that will do it in the season, and I assume he'll be one of them. He could be like a 45, 50 point guy, but you're looking at all those points will be even strength for the most part. So low power play point numbers. So that's not going to boost his totals at all. And then his peripherals are basically shots only. So Tyson Barrie, if you drafted him high, this might be like a sign of things to come, unfortunately. I don't expect him to go 5-game stretches regularly without any points, but he's not going to be getting a point, in 75% of his games or anything like that either.
Yep, unfortunately, that's the truth. I mean, we talked about this, like you said, in the offseason. And last year, for example, on the Colorado Avalanche, he was getting 4 minutes of power play time, playing 90% of the power play for Colorado. It was something insane. Whereas now he's playing 40% of the Leafs power play and only around 2 minutes of power play time on ice. On
a significantly worse line too, of course.
Yeah, significantly worse power play. And on top of that, he got so many, like you said, so many power play points last year, and most of his point production in general came from the power play that, like we said in the offseason, it's tough to find where Tyson Barrie is going to find all those points to justify where he was taken in a draft. Now, one thing I will say is that if you drafted him high, you have the benefit of the fact that people are still looking at draft position and might still think Tyson Barrie is a good pick and is just slumping. And so you might be able to ship him off as not necessarily, people might be thinking he's a buy low. Whereas instead, honestly, I'm thinking he's just is what he is. And you're kind of seeing the truth. I don't think there's that much upside to him. So you may be able to sell him as people thinking he's a buy low. For example, in one of my leagues, in my keeper league, I saw him get traded for Alex DeBrincat, which in my opinion is a total win for the person who traded away Tyson Barrie. So that's something to pay attention to. I'm like we said before, not as high on Tyson Barrie as a lot of people were. My next point here is going to be about the Oilers, and not the whole team, but more specifically Connor McDavid. Can he break a barrier that we haven't seen broken from a points perspective in ages? He's currently sitting at 2.43 points per game right now. Almost 2.5 points per game.
That's insane.
Can we see him get 2 points per game this year?
No. But I mean, you can't argue with what they've been doing so far. But I mean, as we know, the whole team is a little on fire at the moment, especially James Neal. But no, let's be realistic for a minute.
I wouldn't write it off. I wouldn't write off the fact that McDavid could, in some kind of realm, get
is he playing in the AHL?
I mean, he's right now. I guess it seems like it. If you watch him play, it does sometimes seem like he's playing in the AHL.
Okay, so my next bit here is about the Flyers. They are the lowest shooting percentage team at even strength, shooting at 5.34% as a team, which is insane and indicative of a lot of the struggles that have been going on so far. There's a lot of things about the Flyers that point to that good things should be coming. I think the most concerning thing about our boy Voracek, who managed to get 3 points in his last game, is his weird demotion to the third line. I don't see this lasting particularly long, but we'll see what happens. There's also a bit of a shakeup where we saw Couturier and Konecny wind up on the top power play with Voracek and Giroux. It looks like daily faceoff is back to showing that as being reversed. I want to say it's going to continue. I will have to see if they continue to play this way. I'm under the impression it will, because actually this daily faceoff lineup is from the 15th, and this happened more recently than that. So odds are we are going to see an increased role for Voracek again. I mean, I guess not increased on the power play, but I do think that after he finally broke through his little slump, that he'll be able to get some more ice time back, and won't be on bust watch so much, I think. But I think it's a good sign for a lot of these Flyers players that haven't quite done as well as expected. The one that actually is coming to mind the most is Kevin Hayes. I mean, AV loves him. He's been given quite a bit of runway and just hasn't quite gotten things to connect for him. And it seems like a lot of what's happening is in the right direction. The shots are, making it to the net and just not going in. So, I mean, you look at Hayes, you look at Couturier, and then Voracek as kind of the main struggling points here of guys that just aren't getting their points. And it seems like it's just a team issue right now. but that there's not necessarily anything totally wrong. It's just they're a bit snake bitten as a team.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at a guy like Kevin Hayes too, it's his average shooting percentage on his career over 5 years is 12.8%, and he's currently shooting at 6.7. So definitely the team is pretty snake bitten at the moment.
Not to ignore Giroux as well, who I think has 3 points in his first. He's got the same amount of points as Voracek. Are we going to drop Giroux now? Oh boy, I'm sorry. That was just rude.
Okay, number 9 here is going to be, I think that Varlamov is being written off too early.
Oh, you've come around to my point of view when I was getting extremely mad about everybody losing their minds about him.
I don't understand why people are losing their minds about Varlamov. He had one terrible, terrible game, one awful game, sure. And aside from
James
that,
Neal
his games have been fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Aside from that, his games have been great. Like, he's had above 950 games, 2 now. And only one that was, of course, the 7-9 or whatever it was, but he's looked fantastic. There's no reason to drop. Okay, not above 950. I should correct myself here. 929 in his first game, then a 789, and then a 946.
Quality starts.
Varlamov, yes, he will be fine.
Yeah.
I think that people are overreacting way too much, especially when you see Greiss do well. I think that the whole system thing is still there, and again, he's played 3 games. It's way too early. I see everybody around like thinking, oh, should I drop Varley for this, drop Varley for that? Everyone wants to drop Varley for Samsonov, for example. Samsonov is getting worse save percentages than Varlamov is. It's like when people come to you with a forward and says, oh, I don't know, this player is just not producing and they have 4 points in 6 games. It's like, well, what more do you want them to do? They're doing fine. It's the same thing with Varlamov. He had one terrible game, and aside from that, he's playing really well.
Yeah, Samsonov just hasn't had his bad game yet. He does have 2 great games in those 9-6s, but I mean, he's playing those wins were against the Islanders, who can't score on anything, and then a struggling Dallas team, which hasn't managed to get anything done either. The rest of his games look, I think, closer to what we're going to expect from like season-long Samsonov, which is close to a 900, maybe a little higher, and I don't know. Hopefully, bailed out by his team for the most part. I'm not trying to slight Samsonov. I really do think he's going to be one of the best goaltenders soon. I just don't think he's going to be one of the best goaltenders right now. And I think Varlamov, if you drafted him, you were drafting a relatively low start count, good peripheral number guy. And that's, besides the one game, that's what you're going to get so far, it seems. He's going to play again tonight against Winnipeg, which will be a tough challenge, as Winnipeg, not great defensively, but as we know, can light a goaltender up. So we'll see what happens in this game. This is going to look really bad if he just gets shelled right when we put this video out, or this, video and podcast out. But we'll see. All right. And my last take, I'm going to say that everybody should be expecting a bit of declines from both Rask and Halak. The NHL put out their top 25 goaltenders again, and Rask was second. And I kind of looked into that. I was like, why is Rask second for fantasy goaltenders right now? You're looking at a guy that's going to get, 50 starts or so, pretty much splitting with Halak at the moment. Yes, he's playing amazingly, but what is behind all this? So I did a little digging, and this team is leading the league in all strength save percentage at a 949 combined between Halak and Rask. Their high danger save percentage is a 929, which is ludicrous. Both of them combined. So they're both playing out of their minds right now. And they're sitting at a 15.89 expected goals against over 6 games, which puts them, in the high 2s. That's not a great number, really. It's not horrible, but it's not a team that you're expecting to win the majority of games. Well, it's like a 2.55 or something, so it's okay. But they currently only have given up 10 goals in those 6 games. You look at all this, and you also see that Boston is running a negative Corsi, very slightly, honestly. They're at 49.7% of the Corsi share, which means they're being slightly outshot, not crazily. But the bigger question mark here is their expected goals for. They are losing. They're only about 45% of the expected goals for per game. So technically, they should be losing more games than they're winning right now, and that is not what's happening. So a lot of this is falling. You combine all these numbers, and I know I threw a lot of stats at you, but you combine all these numbers, and what you're realizing is these goaltenders are playing not just good, they're playing too good. They're playing too good to be sustainable by any means. They're not exactly getting bailed out by their team, as the expected goals for is against them right now, which means that it's the goaltenders right now that are holding everything up. As much as I like Rask and Halak, there's no goaltender. Like, we saw this happen with Gibson, where for the longest time he was putting the team on his back and then he collapsed. These guys can't hold this up. It's not normal for this to be happening the way it is. And it's only 6 games in, and that's why everything seems so fine and dandy, because they've managed to do it over these 6 games. But I do think we're going to see a decline here, and it's probably going to happen relatively soon. It may not be like some sort of, this isn't one of those regression to the mean immediate type things where they're both going to go completely cold, but we're going to see the real colors come out. We're going to see Boston lose some games, and we're going to see Rask and Halak have a couple bad games, and we're going to get back to what we expect from them, which is pretty good numbers, pretty low starts for a high starts for a backup, low starts for a starting goaltender, and kind of the reason you draft either one of them. They both have a point, a relevance to be on certain teams, but neither one are complete like bombshells right now. There's better. I would not put Rask as my second fantasy goaltender at all. And Halak might be one of the better backups, but he's still a backup. You shouldn't treat him as, a supplementary 2 goaltender unless you can get away with that.
Yeah, Brandon doesn't rail on goaltenders very often. So when you do, I usually recommend listening because normally that's not really the case. Now, what I should say really quickly here is that when you look at the 5-on-5 threat levels on HockeyViz, Rask actually gets a far, far easier job than Halak. Halak is actually playing more out of his mind than Rask is. The threat levels when Rask is not on the ice is plus 15%, whereas when he is on the ice, it's minus 8% on him. So Rask is getting a much easier job than Halak. So I'd say Halak is playing more out of his mind right now than Rask is. So like Brandon was saying, don't be picking up Halak with this idea that he's, a starting goaltender. It will come down for both of them, but I think Rask's good early start is much more sustainable at the moment than Halak's is. And also something to note there is I think that for the rest of the season, we will probably be seeing a 50-50 split. It worked for Halak last year, or for Rask, last year, and I think they'll continue to want to do that and rest him.
Yep.
Okay, let's move on to the schedule here and give you a preview. Like we said, there are some actually good schedules this weekend, and there's teams that are playing both off days. So let's go through them. So let's first go through the teams that have good matchups this weekend, those that have easy teams to play against. The first one, and I think this is the easiest schedule by far of the weekend, is Washington, who plays versus the Rangers at home, and the Rangers are tired coming to Washington. And then they play at Chicago on Sunday. And then there's Edmonton, who plays versus Detroit, and then at Winnipeg. Calgary plays at the Kings and then has a back-to-back against Anaheim, who is also tired. So that's going to be a little bit of a sludge game. But in my opinion, the Kings and the Ducks are an easy matchup for the Calgary Flames. And then lastly, there's the Vancouver Canucks, who play at New Jersey and then at the Rangers. And it's a back-to-back, and the Rangers are also tired. So that's also going to be a little bit of a sludge game there. Moving on to teams with bad matchups. It's going to be Anaheim, who plays versus Carolina and at Calgary. And Calgary is going to be tired. Dallas plays at Pittsburgh and then at Philadelphia, and Philadelphia is tired while Dallas is also playing a back-to-back, so that's a sludge game there as well. And that's a hard matchup for Dallas as they just really haven't been able to get anything going. Philly's been really good at keeping puck possession, and Pittsburgh is just hard to play against because they have Sidney Crosby, and that's it. Moving on to teams that play both off nights. And Brandon Tanev. First line, Brandon Tanev, the new Ryan Reeves.
Woo!
For teams to play both off nights, it's going to be Anaheim, Chicago, Edmonton, Washington, and the New York Rangers. And then because of that, let's move into the weekend pickup suggestions, which are normally tailored to the teams that have good matchups and also teams that play both off nights. So my first one here is going to be Adam Henrique, center on the Anaheim Ducks.
As well.
Yep, 9% owned. He's had a good go of things as of late, and he's kind of one of those hot hands that you could grab and hope for the best. And Anaheim, although they have a tough schedule in Carolina and Calgary, they should, I think, have a pretty good go of things.
He's got he's been played more than gets. He's technically top line now with Raquel and Silfverberg and top power play. They've moved Getzlaf down to what they're calling the second line. He's playing less time and second power play. So it's interesting. It's terrible, but it's interesting.
I mean, I'm horrified that when I said Getzlaf would lose the top line, it would happen this soon and it would go to Adam Henrique.
Right.
I didn't expect it to be Henrique. I expected Getzlaf at some point to lose top line, top power play this year because he's just old. I didn't expect it to be Henrique.
Yeah, weird. I'm going to stick with Anaheim a little bit and mention this is the third time I think you could have just held Silfverberg since the first time I mentioned him, and actually would have done pretty well for yourself considering you had a 3-point game last night. But Jakob Silfverberg, right wing, 11% owned, led all the forwards in ice time at 18 minutes on Wednesday. So Silfverberg is the guy they're leaning on right now. He's making it happen. He's not, again, I still don't think he's a long-term hold. I think Ricky Rax is probably the best forward there at the moment. And I still have a lot of faith in Ondrej Kase, but they didn't only play him 13 minutes last game, so who knows? But so I'm still.
Really? We're gonna brush over Kase quickly now?
Yes. So I am into Silfverberg this weekend. I actually think Kase is an all right pick too, but because they keep doing this first line, third line thing with him, it makes him more unpredictable than Silfverberg at the moment.
Yep. Agreed. Moving on to my next one, it's going to be a center left wing in Chicago who has both off nights. That's going to be Andrew Shaw, who's now playing on the wing with Patrick Kane. He is 10% owned. I like him a lot this weekend. A lot. Like, I think he has a good matchup. I think he has decent matchups. A little bit tough, but decent matchups. Of course, both off nights, so they won't be tired for either game. And on top of that, I like his deployment. And of course, he's also a banger. So he's going to get you those banger stats on top of a pretty decent point upside.
Yep. I had one on my list too. The next one here is Pavel Buchnevich, right wing, 16% on the Rangers. He's got those off nights, so that's going to help out. But he's also playing 19 minutes of average time on ice so far, and he's still top line, top power play. I think he's the one that people just aren't paying attention to for some reason. He's 16% owned. I don't quite understand it. Everything looks okay so far for him. He's got 2 points in 3 games. Again, the Rangers have only played 3 games, so maybe that's why. Maybe that's why people aren't paying attention, because he doesn't have the sparkly big numbers in any category, and it's because of game starts. So yeah, the Rangers' matchups aren't that bad either. I mean, they have Washington, and then they've got the Canucks, and the Canucks might still not have Markstrom. I don't even know what's going to happen with them. They're going to be on a back-to-back there as well, so that'll be interesting to see who they actually put in net if Markstrom's not back. I doubt they'd back-to-back Demko, but it's possible. Anyway, I think that the Rangers have the opportunity to score some goals this weekend. Buchnevich is in as good a place as he can be for a guy that's only 16% owned, and that's kind of the bottom line. He's right there with red-hot Mika Zibanejad and Artemi Panarin, and he's on top power play. He may not get as many touches as those guys, but you're getting a guy that's 16% owned, an easy pickup, and you can just let him go if you need to, or you can hang on to him longer term if you want to see where things shake out for him.
For my next one here, I'm going to go to a defenseman that I can't believe I have to bring up, but I have to here. And that's Alex Edler. Again, I mean, it happens once every season. We have to.
Every year Edler's on this stupid list, or on one of our lists for most of the season.
And it always takes too long because I think about it and I'm like, should I suggest Edler? I like, but he's probably highly owned. And then I look it up and I'm like, what the hell? How is he so lowly owned? And in this case, he's lower owned than JT Miller. Come on, people. Really? We're picking up JT Miller over Alex Edler? God.
Everybody likes their forwards.
In you all. So disappointed.
Well, JT Miller does have a point per game so far, but he's JT Miller.
To be fair, JT Miller's like at 53%. Edler's at like 52%. So it's not that big of a deal, but I kind of wanted to make it a big deal. It's just what I do. But Alex Edler is a fantastic option. Really good banger cats, obviously. And then on top of that, he's top power play, which is clicking quite a bit. And I like his points upside for the weekend in his matchups against the Devils and the Rangers. So Alex Edler, in my opinion, is a long-term ad and someone you should definitely have, especially if you're in a league that counts blocks. It would be shocking to me if he's still out there. But Edler, to me, is probably one of the number one kind of pickups for this weekend if he's available. Because even at 52%, I mean, that's still quite a few 12-person leagues that he's available in. Maybe not so worth it in a points-only league. But at this point, I'd rather have Edler over Quinn Hughes.
Yeah, I'd agree for sure. All right, my next one is going to be Zack Kassian. Left wing, 24% owned. I'm actually kind of surprised he's this lowly owned at this point. But if you can ride with the red-hot Edmonton Oilers, they do get to play, as we mentioned, Detroit and Winnipeg, 2 of the leakiest teams so far this season. And he gets to play with Draisaitl and McDavid, and that's enough. You add that with the fact that he's likely to punch people in the face and get a bunch of hits. He's a nice little pickup. You might not keep on to him for too long, but I actually do see it being a long-term ad in several leagues that count PIMs and stuff if you want to hang on to him for longer than just this weekend. But just this weekend's good enough. We've looked at Edmonton has just been playing all these teams that are just you can just light up and have been doing so. So they have 2 more teams just right on the docket to continue that. And Zack Kassian's right there waiting to get some more points. He's for points only leagues. He's not like the biggest guy to be focusing on, I guess, but he can still pick some up, especially against these 2 teams this weekend.
Yep. My next one here, I'm going to go to a 1%er since you talked about Edmonton. I'm going to talk about Ethan Bear, defenseman, 1% owned. This is for the deepest of leagues. The reason I like him is simply an upside play. He's a top pairing, 2 points in his last 3 games. I don't see why you shouldn't just take a flyer, especially if you're in a ridiculously deep league. Like, if you're down in points or something, sure, why not? It's the hottest team in hockey. They don't have a bad schedule. He's not... Again, I can't stress enough how much it's just the deepest of leagues here with Ethan Bear, but I do like that he's playing with Darnell Nurse on that top pairing.
All right, my last one here is Thatcher Demko.
Love it.
He's a goaltender over in Vancouver, if you haven't heard of him. He's going to get at least, well, he's going to start tonight on Thursday, it seems. You're probably hearing this after that, but he should get at least one, possibly both, as I just mentioned, of the starts this weekend, because we don't know what the deal with Markstrom is yet. Probably not. You assume they'll call somebody up. They must have called somebody up already, and I just don't know who it is. But
they did say that Markstrom was going to be back this weekend, so there's also a chance that Markstrom starts.
Okay, yeah, I mean that's honestly fine. You don't really need him to be getting a ton of like both these starts anyway. But the fact that he'll get one, and they're not exactly the world's worst starts at either Jersey or the Rangers, kind of the best start you could get. So, especially in points leagues, I think is a good option. Is the ones that reward wins. As I mean, Vancouver's not the best team in the world, but I do like them against either the Devils or the Rangers coming up this weekend.
Yep, I love that suggestion. I would definitely pick up Thatcher Demko, at least as a spot start. I would honestly pick him up over Samsonov, to be honest, at least this weekend. I like the Vancouver Canucks schedule way more than Washington's. Okay, and actually, speaking of Washington, I have a defenseman there in Radko Gudas who's at 19% owned. If you need hits, I've got hits. Radko Gudas has got hits. He's hitting again and blocking again. So he's kind of figured it out. He took a little bit to kind of get in the groove, it seems, for Washington. And at first he forgot that he's a hitter and a banger and was getting assists. And how stupid of him. How dare he get points? Instead, now he's getting hits and blocks again. Much more Gudas-like. So in case you're like me and dropped him because he wasn't hitting or blocking, this is just a PSA that he is actually blocking and hitting again. And in case you're in need of those, he's going to be a good ad for this weekend because of his off nights. And honestly, rest of season, he has a lot of off nights too. So he's just someone to always have on kind of watch list in case you need hits or blocks. And then Brandon has no more, so I'll take my last one here. And again, similar to Ethan Bear, I can't stress enough how much I'm talking about just deep leagues here. And that's Brett Howden. Center, 1% owned. Centering the second line with Kreider and Kakko. But can I recommend how much this is just for deep leagues? I'm not that high on Brett Howden. They honestly could change it up after Thursday's game and not put Howden on the second line. I think Elias Anderson deserves it more. So who knows? All I'm saying is watch that second line center role, and that could be an interesting line to pay attention to because I don't hate the Rangers' schedule this week. It's not fantastic, but it's also not awful. They're playing two kind of leaky teams in Washington and Vancouver over Friday and Sunday, so I'd pay attention to that second line, see who's there. The one problem, of course, is that Kreider, for example, has only been getting around 14-15 minutes, so that line is being limited in time on ice. But for the most part, I like the opportunities that are there. So in a deep league, why not?
Yeah, I agree. As much as I don't like the idea of recommending somebody like Brett Howden, but I mean, he's getting the opportunity, so you might as well give him a shot if you're in that deep of a league.
So there you go. That is the weekend episode. Other than that, thank you for listening. We will see you for Monday's week preview.
Yep. Thanks for listening.